Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on our product Jumpstart series with WaveMaker. I'm your host, Aditya, and I'll be walking you through this webinar today. Along with me, I have Anushri, who's our lead developer at WaveMaker, and she also handles WaveMaker training. Today's session is about building applications with the help of prefabs, and Anushri will be walking you through all the details around the prefab, right? So let me give you a quick recap as to what has happened so far in our product webinar series with WaveMaker. So in session one, we had an overview of the platform, which was basically giving you an idea about WaveMaker as a low-code tool, its capabilities, and also the real estate around the studio, right? So you can find the links of our previous webinars in our YouTube channel. Right. I'm sure most of you who have registered for this webinar have already received them. In session two, we spoke about the basics of application development. So this webinar gave everybody an idea about what is the different types of integrations that are possible with WaveMaker, which includes your databases and your APIs, and how you could use drag and drop to quickly build your applications with WaveMaker. However, in today's session, we are talking about prefabs and how you can reuse them in WaveMaker. So these are reusable assets that you can build in WaveMaker that are heavily customizable as well, right? And prefabs, about the architecture of prefabs, etc. All of this would be explained to you in great detail by Anushri. In Just to kick things off, I'd like to give you a brief overview about the platform today. So let me share my screen. So WaveMaker is a low-code application development platform that is built by developers for developers. We follow a completely open standards framework when it comes to application development, and we follow a component style of application development as well, which is the building blocks, or rather the backbone of prefab, right? So the prefab acts like the backbone for the components that you can use like a Lego-like framework to build apps in WaveMaker, right? Now with WaveMaker, you can build highly customizable applications, and you can deliver great value with incredible agility and speed to your end customers, right? So what powers WaveMaker behind the scenes is, given that we are on an open standards framework, we follow Angular, Bootstrap, HTML, and CSS on the front end, and at the back end we are primarily Java based, so it's Spring and Hibernate on the back end. So you can build web responsive applications, and these apps are responsive to work on any browser of any form factor out there, right? When it comes to mobile, you can create React Native mobile applications with WaveMaker. And with these mobile applications, if you want to list them on the App Store or the Play Store, WaveMaker has an engine called as App Chef, through which you can install the necessary certificates for both Android and iOS to generate your respective APK or IPA file, right, for either Android or for iOS. Now, for every application that you build in WaveMaker, we are generating code, right? And the code that you're generating is human readable, it is maintainable, extensible, and portable as well. Furthermore, our generated applications can be deployed anywhere, free of any runtime dependency or hidden charges back to the platform, right? So whatever apps that you develop in WaveMaker, you can deploy it on cloud, on premise, it doesn't matter. And you can basically manage the hosting yourselves to, based on the end users that you're expecting to hit that particular application. Our pricing model is also developer based. So you can build unlimited number of apps with WaveMaker, and unlimited number of end users can access these applications as well. So this particular slide explains to you the end-to-end capabilities of the platform. So WaveMaker is heavily, or rather relies completely on microservices-based architecture. And with that, we can integrate with any REST API of choice, either using a Swagger URL or file, right? In addition to this, you can also connect to any of your existing enterprise assets such as databases, workflows, etc. out of the box, LLMs as well. And with WaveMaker, we also follow a very high protocol, and when it comes to security and keeping your applications robust. So we have, we are OWASP compliant to the top 10 security vulnerabilities. And when it comes to the generated code that we are producing, it is Veracode certified, right? So it's Veracode certified as well, which is a high code quality and standard. And when it comes to security and authentication and authorization out of the box, WaveMaker supports LDAP, Active Directory, CAS, SAML, OpenID, which makes the entire accessing of security and determining the users quite seamless due to the out of the box functionality that the platform provides. Now over to the front end. So on the front end, we are completely reliant on Angular. So you can everything is all the components that you build, including the widgets that we have out of the box, are all Angular widgets. We have our own theming in place, so you can produce your own themes that act like the governing entity for the look and feel of the application. And you also have prefabs, right? So today's session is all about prefabs, where you can create these reusable components that contain some level of business logic, UI, and configuration properties. And to speak more about prefabs and to give you a demo about prefabs along with its architecture in use, I'm going to hand it off to Anushri, and Anushri is going to take it forward from here.
Thank you, Aditya. I'll take it forward. So, hi everyone, and welcome to the webinar on building and utilizing prefabs across various WaveMaker applications. So, today we will delve into prefab development in WaveMaker. And to begin, I'll first share my screen. To start with, I'll provide a quick walkthrough of what prefabs entails. Moving on to the very first slide, where we will be talking about prefabs that functions as a reusable and distributable component within an application. It is capable of independent testing and interaction with APIs and web data. So the process of integrating prefabs into WaveMaker application is a very straightforward process, and it offers numerous benefits. A few of them are listed off here. Moving on to the second slide, where we will be talking about prefabs architecture. So like any other web application development, prefab architectures is almost the same way. It has three layers involved. The first is the UI layer. The second is the binding layer. And third lies the service layer that represents any backend service that returns a data set. Moving on to the binding layer that sits in between. This acts as a bridge between the service layer and the UI layer to float the data from the UI layer to the services and from the service layer to the UI. So altogether, WaveMaker facilitates this process using variables that I assume all of us here are aware of. So basically, when you use a prefab, it is like adding a ready-made part of your app that fits right in. So let me take you forward to the WaveMaker platform and give you an insight of prefab more in depth and with an example. So this is an app called Employee Portal, and we are on the dashboard page. So in this page, we have used a prefab that I'm going to build in front of you today. So here you can see the statistics of various types displayed in a visually appealing manner on top of the page. We have we have used four colorful cards to display the information. Below it, we have inserted a row where lies two charts. If you see here on the left side lies a chart column, which is out of the box chart available in WaveMaker widget library. And on to the right is a chart called as a radial chart. So to bring more information here, the purpose of this chart is to display the number of leaves applied by employees per month. So an overall look at this chart will give an idea to the user, whoever is using this application, that how many leaves are being applied by various employees each month of the year. Since this is April, we have 4 months of data in the chart as of now. If I scroll down further, in the last row, we can see the list widget, which is again an out-of-the-box widget of WaveMaker. And this list widget displays the head count of various departments and their role. This was just a quick overview of the app, and the intent was to draw your attention to the two charts that is being used here. So taking you further, I would also like to show you the list of available charts in the WaveMaker. So if you search for the widget called charts under the widget section here in the studio, you will find that WaveMaker offers around 8 default charts, such as bar chart, line chart, chart, etc. However, if you take a look closely, you won't find the chart like the radial chart we are using here listed in the WaveMaker widget list option. So how did we manage to implement it? This question might be on minds of many. So what if we need a type of chart which is not listed here in the WaveMaker chart widget list? To address this question, what we have done here is we have built a prefab that you can see here, known as radial chart. And we have built this chart using a library called D3, and then have used it as ready to use component in the project called Employee Portal app. Once the prefab is published, it can be found under the prefab section of the app and is ready to use. Moving ahead further, if you want to add it to our project, it's very simple. We simply need to drag and drop it onto the canvas here. And then we can bind this to the variables data set as shown here. And we are all set to go. We can now see how convenient it is to use prefab in any of the WaveMaker project. Say with just few simple steps, we can integrate prefabs to enhance functionality and streamline the development process. I hope by now you have a good understanding of what WaveMaker prefabs are. So our goal today is to integrate a third-party library and create a radial chart. While we already discovered that WaveMaker offers its own set of widgets and charts, but incorporating third-party charts can always enhance visualization and highlight specific use cases more effectively. Certainly, by doing so, we are not limiting ourselves to just WaveMaker charts, and we can always integrate third-party libraries like the high chart that is being shown here on the UI. So this is the prefab that we are going to build now. And I'll begin by creating the necessary components and configuring them according to our requirements. If you have any questions or need assistance along the way, please feel free to put your questions here in Q&A box. And yes, to add more awareness, the prefab building process will be divided into two parts. In the first part, the radial chart will be rendered with the static data that is being shown here, resulting in static chart that provide only static information. And subsequently, as we move further, we will delve into making the prefab dynamic. We will initialize properties to enable its interaction with the application. The prefab height and width here can be changed by taking the input parameter for the prefab. So if I may take your attention to the right nav here, we have chart height, chart width, and data set as input parameter. By default, we have kept chart height as 500. If I make it as 800, we can see the response. So taking you further to showcase how this prefab can be built from scratch. To create the prefab in WaveMaker, I'll first go to the prefab section and we'll click on the create button to create a prefab. I'll give the name of the project as radial chart prefab and will also enter a description as radial chart using D3 library. You may choose an icon of your choice and click on continue. This step is completely an optional where you can add multiple members to your project. I'll skip this process and will click on create prefab. So we can see the project is created in the workspace. To create a prefab, call the radial chart in WaveMaker. As a prerequisite, we will only require an access to this URL, which is a GitHub URL for the source code, which is freely accessible and does not require any authentication. The source code here, if you see, explains how the radial chart is built with the help of D3 library. I will take this as a reference and try to build the prefab. So with this, we can also see how smoothly we can integrate any external code or say any external project into WaveMaker project. So to get started, I'll first copy all the style related information from the source code. We'll go to WaveMaker Studio and we'll place them here in style.css main page file. All right. So moving towards our next step where I'll demonstrate how to import a JavaScript files into the prefab. So it's a very simple and a straightforward process. I'll first take you to the blog. And here is the source, as you can see. I'll just copy this source out of it here from line number 48 of this URL. And I'll place it into my browser and right click to save it locally. I have already done this step, so I'll skip it here. Moving back again to the WaveMaker Studio. And we have a file explorer here in the resources panel. And from here, we can directly import the JavaScript file in the prefab. So to import a resource, I'll click on the plus button. We'll expand resources tab and we'll create a new folder here. To create a folder, I'll click on this plus button. We'll name this folder as JS and click on add folder. We can see a new folder is now created. I'll click on this upload files further to select the JavaScript file that I have saved in my local. I have saved it with the name d3.js. v4.min.js. I'll open it. Great. You can now find this file under the resources panel. So this way, the entire D3 library is uploaded in the prefab. Once this step is completed, the question now arises: how the prefab recognize that the file reference is available? So to address this, we need to set a path somewhere. I'll take you to the settings, which sits in the resources panel, and you can find the prefab configuration here. Here, by default, if you see, the CSS is consumed for main.css page. Let's define the path of the uploaded JavaScript file. So I'll just hit on this drop down and would select the path from here and will click on save. The WaveMaker is intelligent enough to showcase the path of all the uploaded files. Lastly, I'll guide you back to the source code one more time. And from there, we will copy the entire script. And I'm going to paste the script into the main script file. Here, I'll first create a function and then I'm going to place the logic. I'll keep it at prefab scope. So I'll write the function here, prefab dot render chart equals to function. And we'll paste the script in between the curly braces here. All right. So in the script, if you see, we are configuring the properties as what should be the height and the width of the chart and chart radius. And since it is a radial chart, we are calculating arc, min radius, etc., and providing all these information statically over here. And if you see the next line, the data is being loaded from the CSV file. If I take you back to this source code, to the CSV section, if you see here, the CSV file contains data this way. It has two fields called as name and value. So instead of reading data from the CSV file, let's read it from the JSON variable. So to achieve this, I'll delete line number 52 from here, which is giving reference to the CSV file. And I have kept the JSON data handy. I'll place it over here. So I have copied it here. Just scroll down to see if we have not missed on anything. Well, so the entire functionality has been encapsulated into prefab chart function. To summarize what I have done so far, we have copy pasted all the code here and removed the CSV file reference and pasted the JSON file here. If you take a look at line number, say 36, if I scroll a little up, what the D3 library is doing is it is selecting the body tag. If I highlight it over here, and it is appending CSV to it. So instead of doing this as a good practice, say as a better practice, I'll go back to design tab and search for a widget called container. I'll drag and drop this container widget onto the canvas and we'll give a meaningful name to this container. So I'll call this container as a radial chart container. I have kept that handy. So I'll just copy it from here and we'll rename the container instead of container 1. to radial chart container. We'll go back to script tab, and here I'm using JavaScript library to refer to the particular element. I'll go to first line number 42 and delete the body tag and refer the WaveMaker container by its name. So I'm deleting the body tag from here. We'll enter the bracket, and inside I'll call the name of the container as radial chart container. So this is the container that we have just dragged and dropped. Similarly, I'll go to line number 36 and we'll do the same thing here. Delete the body and enter the name of the container in a same way. So I'll put name equals to the name of the container. Also, if I take you to the style tab, here you can see in the first line, we are referring body tag. So instead of this body tag, we can give any custom class here. So to give the custom class, I'll just delete this body tag and would enter the custom class name as font ref. I'll copy the name. And also I'll just keep font as 12px. I'll switch now to the design tab. And let's give this class to the container that we dragged and dropped in the design tab. So I'll select the container. We'll go to this style tab and give the class name here. All right. So till now we have pasted all our reference code. Now, if I switch to the script tab, and here I want to highlight here that we have written prefab.render chart function, but we are not invoking it. We need to invoke it once the prefab is ready. So I will write it here. Prefab.render chart. I'm invoking this on the prefab.onReady function. So we are all set, and let's preview to see what we have built. Great. We can see the radial chart is rendered with all the data that we have provided. So this is the way we can integrate any external code or say any external project into WaveMaker project. The output is now being displayed here. The x-axis is considering the name key and the y-axis is considering the value key that we have passed as JSON data. So this is the prefab that we developed, and we can use it across any application. I hope I have made some sense. And if you have any concerns or question, please feel free to ask them here in Q&A box. We have developed a prefab that gives us static output. So let's move further now to see how we can make this prefab more dynamic in nature. For this, we will initialize a few properties so that it can interact with the applications. And to achieve this, I'll take you back to the WaveMaker Studio. We'll switch to the settings tab. We'll go to the prefab configuration to configure the prefab, and we'll switch to the properties tab over here. So user can add prefab properties which are exposed to the developers using the prefab. These properties can take some input from the app that is called as inbound, or give some output to the app called as outbound, or maybe both. So these properties are defined in the prefab scope and will be displayed in the properties panel when the user uses this prefab. As you can see here, under the properties panel, whatever UI properties that we are going to configure would appear here under the properties panel. So switching it back again to the same place. So coming to the UI properties, these are the properties that can be set from the front end by the app developer using the prefab. Next to it is the server properties. So these are the properties that need to be set from the backend, say using Java services by the app developer using the prefab. So this would typically include the token for authorization and much more. Switching on to the events tab, though we are not be using any events to the use case that we are going to build today, but to just give you an awareness on it, this in the events tab, you can define events that can be handled by the developers using the prefab. These events will be exposed under the events tab, as you can see. And by default, there are two events that are being defined here. First is the on load and second is on destroy event. And these will be triggered when the prefab is loaded as well as deleted respectively from the app. Taking you to the methods tab, where you can also define methods for the prefab, which can be externalized. Then lies the packaging. So this is a place where you can define the display name of the prefab. You can choose the prefab icon from here that you want to display, apart from the default icon that WaveMaker offers. Moving back to the properties, and let's first define the UI properties for the prefab to make it dynamic. Let's click on this add button. And I will add an UI property here. We'll call it as dataset. As discovered earlier, we have passed the static JSON objects. So if you define a dataset that expect input from the or to be passed from an application, the prefab is going to be more dynamic in nature. And then I'll add a description here. I'll write description as dataset, or we may call it as object. Expected to be passed from the application. Coming to the data type, this will change as we are expecting a JSON object. So I'll keep data type as object. And will enable isList toggle, as this property may contain list of objects. I'll be keeping default value as blank. And coming to the binding type here, we have three type of bindings that are inbound, outbound, and in-outbound. So inbound allows binding for input value for the property by giving a bind icon just next to it. And similarly, the second one, that is outbound, allows for the value of this property to be bound to another widget by, say, exposing it in the binding dialog. And last is the in-out bound that allows both input as well as output binding. I'm keeping binding type as inbound and we'll click on save. Now I'll take you back to the script tab again here, and we'll try to replace the hard-coded references with the externalized property of the prefab that we have just created. So I will pass here let data equals to prefab dot dataset, the name of the UI property that we have just added. And I haven't set any default value for the dataset UI property. So what I'm doing here is I'll place an OR condition. So whenever the object dataset is empty, it will consider the JSON object that is hard coded here. And additionally, prefab.onChange property is made to call every time we update the UI property. So I'll define that as well. I have kept that handy. I'll copy it from here and place it. Also, if you see in line number 51 as well as in line number 57, every time the container is updated, it is updated with style, that is SVG or data. So I'll clear the existing div by inserting a script that I have kept it handy. I'll place it here in line number 51. So it's time to preview the prefab and see what is built. So I'll click on this preview button. Great. We see that chart is being rendered. And if I may take your attention to the right nav, we can see the UI property that we have externalized and added as a data set here can also be seen. So let me demonstrate what happens when we provide the data set. We can parse a new data set by clicking on the parse icon over here. And I will use the hard-coded object that we have used in the script tab. I have kept that handy. I'll just copy it from here. I'll put it inside property dataset. We'll hit on save. And yeah, before hitting on save, I'll just update the values and name randomly. I'll make it January instead of Jan. And let's make the value as 400 instead of 432. Great. So we can see we got to see new output that is considering the object that is passed here and not the hard-coded one inside the JavaScript. So this is how we can test it individually. Also, the parameters that are defined here at the runtime are expected from the application. So even if the prefab is being used in multiple applications, it behaves differently per the parameters it gets or receives. So a prefab is successfully built and tested now. Before using it inside an application, I want to first showcase what all prefabs a new application can have. To showcase this, I have already created a new application and kept that handy. So I'll open the application. I have named that application as Radial Chart Demo App. I'll just open it in the studio. If you expand the prefab section here, you will get to see the default prefabs here. The prefab that we have just built is nowhere listed. So to test the prefab functionality in the application, the first task we need to do is to publish it. Switching back to the prefab, I'll just show you how we can publish it. So for that, I'll take you to the prefab project and would click on publish. So you will get to see two options over here, whether to publish the prefab to team or you can publish it to project. If you publish this prefab to team workspace, this will trigger an approval request to the team admin where he will get to see all the prefabs, pending list of prefab approvals and can approve. So this is one flow. But before doing that, if the prefab developer wants to ensure that it is working perfectly fine with used inside the application, he can always push it to particular project and this does not require any approval. So I'll click on to project. Next, I'll select the project from here. The name of my project is Radial Chart Demo Application. I'll select that and click on update. We can see the toaster message says published successfully. So let's come back to the new application. that we have just created and refresh the WaveMaker Studio. I'll just expand the prefabs section and we can see the published prefab over here. To use this prefab in a new project, it's a very simple process. We simply need to drag and drop the published prefab onto the canvas. You can see the entire prefab logic is now live inside the application. You may note it displays the static data. So let's see how we can link the UI properties that are externalized by the prefab from the application. You can see and access all the UI properties from the properties panel. So we can pass the value for the data set that is appearing here now in the properties panel. And to demonstrate this, we will first need to create a variable, which I have already kept it handy. So I'll just show you the variable. This is the model variable. If the application would have been, say, using a CRUD operation or an imported APIs or web services as a backend service, I would have chosen any of those options. But since we are trying to demonstrate how we can pass a JSON object or how to pass a data from an application as an input to the prefab, I have chosen the model variable. Let me show you the configuration. So I have named this variable as MV app dataset. And if you see, the owner of the application is set to application so that this variable is accessible across all the pages in the application. The type is being set as entry and set this could be a list by selecting the is list checkbox. And in the text editor, I had the JSON data handy that I have pasted it over here. Let's also edit the JSON object. Instead of Jan, let's put it as January. And I'm clicking on save and close. So next, I will show you how simple it is in WaveMaker to use prefab across any application. So if you see here in the properties panel, I'll go to dataset, bind property, and I'll open the model variable that is MV app dataset and select dataset and we click on bind. And we are all set to go. Let's preview. Great. You can see it is taking the input parameters that is passed. You can see the January over here. So we can conclude that it is taking the input parameters that are being passed from the application and not the static that was passed from inside the prefab. So this is how we can make the prefab more dynamic. And this example just serves as a basic illustration of prefab. So with this, we can conclude that prefabs can be versatile. Say for an instance, if you have or if you need a tool to upload and view documents, you can opt for document viewer prefab. Similarly, if you require a prefab for, say, electronic signature, you can develop one for that purpose as well. And also to build, say, form input prefab, where you can quickly integrate common form fields like text input or, say, checkboxes or like drop downs into your applications and so on. So as you move forward, consider how you can leverage prefab into your projects to save time, reduce development effort, and deliver better user experiences. So always remember, whether it is a document viewer or, say, a sign-in form, or it might be any other component, prefab always offers endless possibilities and customization and innovation. So with this, we come to an end of this webinar. Thank you all for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Anu, for that session. So let's get on to some of the Q&A that we received. While creating a prefab, can we provide height and width And is that a configuration property to which you can basically probably do some styling to the prefab at a page level, I guess. So I think that was one of the questions. Anushri, is this something that you can answer?
If you select a prefab, we have a layout section under properties panel wherein we can always define the width and height of the prefab. So yes, we can do that very easily.
So I'm going to just wrap it up with a couple of more questions today, and right, I think the rest of the questions we'll see if we can answer it over, in the chat, right? So another question I have is that how do we is a prefab that we use for web reusable on mobile, right? While building an application in WaveMaker. So is that something you can quickly let our viewers know?
A prefab once built can be used in any of the platforms offered by WaveMaker. We can either use it in the web or as well as mobile. So to answer to this
Great.
question is of course yes.
Okay, great. I'm guessing there might be some, level of UI changes that might be applicable, but that's something your UI developer can handle, right? There is another question here, which is more to do with, does WaveMaker provide, a repository of prefabs, such as what you built today, like the radial chart, right? So let me take a stab at this question. So yes, we don't have a prefab library of sorts that is exposed to all of our users of the platform. The reason is a prefab is something which is very centric to a individual enterprise's use case, right? And it could be some sort of proprietary information there which you might not be comfortable sharing. So from that point of view, what we have done is we have ensured that in larger enterprises, when you build a prefab, you can basically create your own internal marketplace of prefabs to ensure seamless sharing within the developer community that you have within your enterprise. Right. So I hope that answers your question. But we will keep updating our documentation with how you can create more of these reusable or generic prefabs, and I'd urge you to look out for that at some point. One more question. We have time for one more question, and I think they would like to know whether the test prefab for today will be available to import in our studio space. Yeah, so that's something that we can probably share with the attendees today. We haven't figured out exactly how we are going to make this prefab be available to you. But yeah, shortly, I think over email, we'll communicate on how we can make this particular prefab available to everybody so that they can try it out, right? So we can also give you the respective documentation to support this as well. So look out for our follow-up email on this, right? With that being said, I'd like to conclude today, and I'd like our viewers to tune in to our next session, which is going to be about uh, the basics of mobile application development. So tune into that session, and thank you for tuning in for today's Product Jumpstart series.